Do you think that's a smart pathway for the Republicans to go down with the Democrats, increasing federal spending at a time where we've seen some progress on this, cutting spending?
No, I think it's a bad idea. And I think it's one of those where if we're just a little bit less bad than the other side, the voters are going to vote for people who are unapologetic, big government tax and spenders out there, and that's what you get out of people like Hillary Clinton.
Scott Walker made a lot of news with that as Republicans are itching to bust the budget caps. Those budget caps they were kind of rough, right? But all they did was decrease the level of spending increases, right? That's a cut in Washington when you slow the increase in spending. And especially when it comes to defense and those overseas contingency operations, which tend to blow a lot of money, the Republicans want more money to go into the Pentagon. And, my view on that, I was like, well, you want to spend more? Show me where you're going to cut elsewhere. And we've made huge progress. This is because of the Tea Party, by the way, holding the Democrats' feet to the fire on spending. And so we've reduced the budget deficit over the last 3 years, and it's been significant. And that's a real accomplishment. Yet the Republicans want to work with the Democrats, the Hill reported yesterday, in spending more of our money. Scott Walker said, bad idea. You're going to lose your credibility on this, and you could find yourself out of office. A lot of people wondering whether the Senate will be held by Republicans if the Republicans continue to find so much common ground with Obama. Joining us now, our old friend Larry Kudlow, conservative economist, television personality. That's what it says on my sheet, Larry. Television personality. I love that. That makes it sound.
Listen, I'm not as famous as you are, but we have a great weekend radio show, the Larry Kudlow Show. It's in 179 cities on Saturday.
I was just going to say that. You stole my thunder.
Thank you.
And radio personality was the next thing. But when you hear television personality, Larry, it's like you're the Kardashians. I mean, you're a real economist and a real writer. Anyway, it's great to talk to you again, Larry. So Walker made a lot of news with me yesterday on the spending caps issue, and also I want to talk to you about his decision, which some are criticizing and others saying very smart, if he should run for president, which surely he will, skip Florida. But let's start with the budget caps issue. My concern here is that Republicans, when they campaigned on opposing Obama, on resisting Obama's federal overreach on a whole bunch of issues, obviously immigration amnesty, on spending, and so forth. And now the Republicans, they spent an enormous amount of time on this trade deal over the past several weeks and decided not to do much on the immigration amnesty issue. And now they're spending as well. What's your take on what that might do to the Republicans' juice in 2016?
Well, I think Scott Walker's right, and it's interesting to me. I've always felt that Scott Walker had just about the strongest political backbone of anybody in the country. I'm not endorsing; it's too early to endorse. There are other candidates who are very good on spending as well. But what he's saying is something very important. I gave the GOP a lot of credit. In 2011 and 2012 and 2013, they did enforce the spending caps. And spending, at least appropriated spending, not entitlements, it fell. In fact, it dropped all the way back to 2008 levels. And if you ask me, less spending is like a tax cut because Uncle Sam will take less money out of the economy that we could put to better use. Now, you're right. The story has slipped in the last budget cycle, and may slip some more in the current budget cycle. And I felt they have to find a way to improve defense where efficient, but at the same time, they've got to offset that with cuts elsewhere and keep the momentum. Spending is getting to about 20% of GDP. That's good. It was 25% when Obama's stimulus package went through. I'd like to see it drop another point or two in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's one of the few highlights of the past, few years for Americans. Like, look, we can actually slow the growth of government, and we demonstrated that we can do it. And I think that helped usher in the Republican victory in 2014 because Republicans campaigned on that. We want to stop this federal overreach, and if we need to spend some more on the Pentagon and smartly spend and be transparent about where the money's going, not to sensitivity training, but to, real verifiable things that we need, then we have to cut elsewhere. That just is common sense to me.
Right, and I couldn't agree more. And look, a lot of the military hawks in the Republican Party are probably right. All right, we're not, whatever it is we're doing, we don't really have a strategy in the Middle East, but whatever it is we think we're doing, we're probably underfunding key aspects of defense, including the so-called investment accounts where the weaponry is put together to keep our world lead. But that doesn't take you off the hook elsewhere in the budget. For example, I got one. The XM Bank is up for reauthorization, I think maybe the end of the month or the end of next month.
Export-Import Bank.
Why do we need the Export-Import Bank? 2% of exports are financed. It's all gigantic companies. It's called the Boeing Bank for good reason. And actually, good studies have shown, including the CEO of Delta, that when we help these foreign countries, some of whom are our enemies, we actually take American jobs out of the way. So I don't want to be long-winded. I'm just saying, get rid of the XM Bank. You want to cut spending? Get rid of the XM Bank.
Yeah, that's something.
Get rid of a bunch of farm subsidies we've been trying to get rid of. Get rid of
sugar.
Corporate welfare we've been trying to get rid of.
Like 4 families benefit from the sugar subsidies, by the way. 4 families.
Right.
Like 4 of them.
That's another one, right? Just
get rid of it.
Get that, and
sick of that.
It gives the GOP more of a Main Street
message, and just appeal to everybody with that message. I want to move on to what Walker said.
But it's also good economics.
Yeah, it's smart. It's smart economics to have power return to the people in their localities and their states. They have more money to figure out their own priorities and get the feds out of our faces and out of their lives. I'm just if I see another crane in Washington D.C., we're just spending. The lobbyists, the spending in Washington, D.C. on all levels is just totally out of control. Let's talk about what Walker said about Florida. I asked him a question about competing, and this is what he said.
If we chose to get in, I don't think there's a state out there we wouldn't play in. I mean, other than maybe Florida, where Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio are, listen, some of the polls essentially tied, and they're going to eat up a good amount of that financial advantage that Governor Bush is going to have. Remember, Rick Scott spent something like $100 million
a lot
running for governor there last year, so it won't be that much, but a good chunk of that will be gone after the Florida primary. But short of that, and I think our message, common sense, conservative reform, if we were to get in this election, could play just about anywhere out there.
So implicit in that is that he would decide, given Rubio and Jeb facing off for the winner-take-all. Wasn't winner-take-all before. We thought it was going to go proportional, but it's winner-take-all in Florida, Larry. Is that a smart move for someone like Walker, who could play in other states and save resources that would just be blown? Because there's no way he's going to win Florida, in my view.
Well, you're probably right. He's probably right. I don't know enough about Florida politics. I mean, I guess there's an alternative view that, Bush and Rubio just hammer each other to death, and a third person squeaks through. That's one possibility.
That's a big risk. That's a lot of money to spend in Florida for a small chance.
Right. The media markets are very expensive in Florida. On the other hand, Republicans got to win Florida come next November, so you can't walk away from the state altogether. But I don't know. Some people tell me Jeb Bush is going to sweep the Florida primary. Other people say absolutely not. It's a little early to make that call. So maybe Scott Walker's right. I don't know. He's doing very well, Scott Walker.
Yeah.
And I think I spent several hours with him in Madison, Wisconsin, a couple of weeks ago. And
tell me about that. That.
It was great. I mean, at his request, I came out. I mean, he's an old friend. I've interviewed him many times. And we spent a couple, 2.5 hours going through a lot of big issues, all the major issues, I hope. And we talked and talked and talked. And I also recommended some experts he should talk to. But the thing about him is, when you sit across the table, there's really only 1 or 2 people in the room besides us, he just absorbs everything. And, I've worked for President Reagan. I've also helped advise some others. Absorbing what you get is really an important skill for a president, because there's no way you can predict what's going to come up in the future, and there's no way you could absolutely read and, memorize every bloody memo that comes in. You got to talk to people, and you got to absorb things fast, and that's what he does. And then the second part is he has very good instincts, even where he's not necessarily an expert. He has very good instincts between right and wrong, Laura. Sometimes it's that simple, right
common
and wrong.
Sense. Yeah, common sense and I think virtuous, courageous, having courage, virtue, a sense of right and wrong. common sense. I mean, those if we have that and integrity in a president, I mean, boy, we'll make a lot of good decisions. And,
you see, Reagan,
I don't want. Go ahead.
Scott loves Reagan, and to some extent styles himself after Reagan. I love Reagan because I worked for him. Reagan taught me all the politics I know. Yeah. And Reagan was the same way. Reagan knew the difference between right and wrong instinctively. And he used to say to people, look, let's just do the right thing here. Let me handle the politics.
And he's really good at politics. I got to move.